This is a call to order of the March meeting of the Bridgeport Board of Education Governance Committee. Today's date is Monday, March 1st, 2021. The time is noted as being 6:35 p.m. Present are committee members John Weldon, committee chair, and committee members Joseph Lombard and Joseph Sokolovic. I do not see any other board members here, but I will note that from the staff, Superintendent Testani is here. Dr. Victor Black is here. Therese Mcguire, Francine Carbone, Lindsay Davis are here, and they're all here at this. Oh, and Dr. Planas is here. Louise Planas is here, and they're all here as the discussion relates to magnet policies. So the first thing I'm going to ask for is an approval of the minutes, February 1st, 2021. Is there a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
Moved by Mr. Sokolovic. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Is there any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay.
Abstain.
Did somebody abstain?
I abstain, Joseph Lombard.
Mr. Lombard abstains. Okay. The next item on the agenda is related to discussion and possible referral for board approval, remote board member participation, and in-person board and committee meetings. Is that something we think is going to be a fairly rapid discussion after you've seen the draft policy, or would you rather push that to after the magnet in deference to the staff that's present? What are your thoughts?
I didn't see any big changes, but we could move it around just in the interest of letting staff get home quicker.
Fine. You okay with that, Joe?
I haven't seen it.
Okay.
I didn't get this. So.
Okay. Well, a link to the packet was sent. Rita, if you would resend the link to Joe Lombard so he has access to it, I would appreciate it.
Thank you.
But based on what you've said, I'll seek a motion to hear item number 3, review of district magnet policy, prior to item number 2. Is there a motion to that effect?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Sokolovic. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. So now we're going to talk about a review of district magnet policy. There are 3 separate policies. There's elementary admission, high school admission, and there's sibling policy. So this was referred to this committee by Mr. Sokolovic. These 3 policies were forwarded to the committee members. Joe, you're going to get a link to that. So I'm just going to turn it over to Mr. Sokolovic to see what it was he wanted to discuss about these.
Oh yeah. So some years ago, maybe about been in implementation for about 2 years, the magnet policy changes, and I just wanted to revisit to see how it was going in the schools and the impact of the policies, because as you know, the people who suggested these policies, most of us are not educators, and we'd like to see the impact on the magnet schools and the programs, the quality and quantity of the programs. If there's been any negative effect, if there's anything that needs tightening up. And also as far as the high school, I would like to also look at the programming and what differentiates a magnet student from a general ed student as well.
So, Mr. Sokolovic, just to be clear on the high school, we're only speaking about central magnet as opposed to central regular neighborhood? Correct. Okay, so we didn't do a lot tonight. We were more focused on the elementaries. We talked a little bit. Dr. Black and I are working with Dr. Graff and Ms. Smith, looking at the entrance requirements because they are extremely dated, and they don't really match up with today's exams and things like that. So can we revisit that component at a later date once we are able to delve a little deeper into that?
Sure.
Thank you.
And also, I don't like just the differentials between the magnet diploma and the general education diploma. Just what distinguishes one from the other.
Okay, we'll make sure that we're prepared to discuss that as well. But we've been really looking at, Dr. Black brought it to my attention a couple of weeks ago, and we had an initial conversation with Eric Graff and Sean Smith, and we'd like to do some more follow-up. It's really antiquated and it needs to be updated to fit today's standards. So, but tonight we do have our elementary classical studies. Lindsay Davis is here. Dr. Louis Planas from Multicultural. Ms. Therese Mcguire from Park City Magnet, who you know very well. And Ms. Francine Carbone's here from High Horizons. And I think Ms. Carbone, you were kind of going to be the spokesperson initially, and then if you had any further questions, the members of the committee, everyone else can kind of chime in a little bit.
Good evening, everyone. Can everybody hear me? Okay. How are you guys? I just wanted to give a little bit of feedback. The policy was revised in 2018. Since then, we've undergone a lot of issues with the pandemic. So I'll speak prior to the magnet school entrance criteria, it was very loosened when we had this revision in 2018. There was entrance criteria across the board from kindergarten through 8th grade, which was rescinded in 2018. Basically, it called for no entrance criteria for grades K through 3, and then a very loosely implemented continuous enrollment criteria for grades 4 through 8. Historically speaking, because I've been part of the magnet school community for a really long time, I won't say how long, but we used to have a rubric that we used that had all different components of the whole child as evaluated and then either accepted or denied based on the rubric. As the years have progressed, the entrance criteria has become weaker and weaker, and therefore we have begun to struggle increasingly meeting the needs of the students. SRBI numbers have increased, special education numbers have increased, and for those of you who may not know, magnet schools are probably the least funded because we're allegedly have the highest performers, so we need the least support. So it's become kind of stretching very, very thin to meet the needs of all of our learners with the loosely implemented revision of the entrance criteria and the continuous enrollment criteria. That's broadly speaking. I mean, there are lots of little things to speak about when it comes to this. I have a very large folder that's probably 3 inches thick with historical data going all the way back to the days of Mike Mulford when we did magnet school policies. And it has become looser and looser and looser as the years have progressed and become much more stressful for students especially, but staff and administration as well.
Okay. So does anyone have any questions?
Yes. I was there when the policy was revised. As you know, I did not have the so a lot of these things are results of compromise, and now as we're seeing, as far as content. Are you saying perhaps the teachers have to differentiate instruction more so now than in the beginning? I mean, to reach all the different levels of students and actually not, because one of my arguments was to keep the screening processes and things was because to reach all our students, because we don't have a gifted and talented, we do have a gifted and talented program, but it's basically anemic. And the magnet schools, in my mind, were focusing as a quasi-gifted and talented program, allowing the staff to teach at a higher level without slowing down any. And that was one of the things I was fearing that might get lost in loosening of the criteria. Is that fear being borne out?
I would definitely say yes. But to be true to the magnet school definition, the magnets were to draw students in that had special interests. So for example, High Horizons is the English language arts focused magnet school. Multicultural is multicultural. Classical studies was, when I was there, it was based on the Socratic seminar. That might have changed since I've left. But what's happened is the focus has definitely remained on those areas, but has become harder to lead the students to a level of enrichment and acceleration because we're doing a ton of review and trying to meet the learners where they are, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does make sense. And it's like, it's not leaving students behind. In my opinion, when we had the old policy, it was just like when we could meet the greater needs of students where they are, if they're all in one place. I know the word grouping used to be a real dirty word in education. It became very out of favor. But when you group students, if you teach to one method, you could get each student the desires they need. As an underfunded district, it's easier to bring our students to the services than the services to our students, and it's more economical and it seems more beneficial to all our students.
Right, and even with the magnet schools, I mean, even the highest achievers, there's going to be different levels of achievement. So even with that said, trying to offer enrichment to the students who are high achievers, what's happening now with the omission of the entrance criteria is that we have this now where we're trying to kind of close it. And, my teachers, and I'm sure that the other administrators on the line can certainly attest to it, they're excellent at doing that, but it takes a ton of time away from the focus that, that we're supposed to really be, focusing on, which is our draw, which is our magnet draw, whatever that might be, whichever school.
All right. And in the past, if you have the numbers available, about what percentage were actually screened out at the initial screenings?
That's very interesting. As far as a percentage, I don't have anything, but I remember having this conversation and you were adamant talking about this, is that, it was kind of like, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. There really weren't a ton of people that were being screened out as a result when we first arrived. But as we decided to manipulate the policy and make changes, it became more difficult. So, when we first got there was criteria like DRA, DRP. Those are all things that were omitted. So the magnet school principals got together and used relevant data to revise the enrollment to the magnet schools. And then as years progressed, there were committees that decided that it was too rigorous to get in, and the one or two parents that, didn't get in with their children, they understood why, and they said, we'll try again. We want the opportunity, but we also don't want it to be where the student doesn't feel successful.
So in your opinion, do you think it would be best to try to go back where we were, or some kind of close proximity to what we had before with slight changes or whatever?
I wouldn't say go back to where we were, but I definitely think a revision is necessary. I was a big proponent of the rubric, and looking at different experiences from the whole child to see what they could bring to the school, not just letter grades. I mean, right now we are basing entrance in grades 4, 5, 6, and 7, and 8 on just solely on letter grades. And quite often, students get A's and B's and 1s and 2s on their report card, and they get into High Horizons or whatever magnet school, and then those A's and B's don't remain A's and B's because the rigor is a little bit more intense. And then, 6 months later, they're getting probation letters and letters to be reassigned to their neighborhood school, which is really, I think, a bigger disservice to students, is allowing them to come in, giving them the opportunity and then saying, well, you're not meeting the criteria here and now you have to go, which I think limiting transition for students is more important to their stability as they progress, developmentally and academically.
I definitely agree. Mr. Chair, if I may just get a poll of the other principals here, see if they're all similarly on the same page.
I see a lot of nodding heads, but I'd like to hear from each of you. We'll start with Dr. Black and kind of work down the line. What are your thoughts on this, Dr. Black?
So in talking with the principals, there's definitely a consensus that for the magnet schools that do have these entrance requirements, the lax and the entrance requirements have resulted in more struggles in being able to progress at a certain rate. And it does require a higher level of differentiation, which takes a bit more time, and then the SRBI numbers and all of that, and the staffing, and just a higher level of work that needs to happen to be able to serve all kids. So that has been articulated by the principals. So what Ms. Carbone shared, I will say from a consensus conversation with the team, I've heard that.
Okay. Dr. Planas?
I don't want to repeat what was already said, but basically I'm in agreement. The amount of work and time that we spend bridging gaps has been pretty substantial at this point. And so not necessarily, as Mrs. Carbone illustrated, going back to what we had, but definitely making some changes, kind of meeting us halfway to where we were before would be certainly helpful to us.
Ms. Mcguire?
As my colleagues have said, we're spending a lot of time and quality time on trying to build the habits of mind for a magnet school, because I've seen, both sides of the lens. Coming from neighborhood to magnet, we've had to build a lot of, these are the habits of mind for a magnet school, time management, task orientation, attention to detail, and all those things are important skills, but we've had to kind of front load all that before you can begin the differentiation, because some of the children are coming in without that habit of mind. And I think when we were doing the entrance screening, it kind of set the tone for parents. This is the expectation, you've selected to send your child here. This is the expectation, right off the bat, we're assessing, do you have the readiness to enter a more rigorous program? So I think having some sort of entrance criteria would be helpful, because it kind of almost set the tone. This is what you're selecting to do. And I think often parents are like, I want my child to go to magnet, but they're not really sure what that means to them until the parents fully immerse into the environment. So I think that parent piece too, helping parents understand, what does it mean when I'm selecting magnet for my child, and what are the expectations? Because we're also, meeting with parents and talking about, how do I organize my agenda, or, my homework hours, what does that look like? Some of the parents weren't prepared for that. There's going to be more hours placed into homework to support the learning that has occurred in the classroom. So, I would agree with some form of an entrance criteria and some more communication to families about, this is what you're selecting for your child when you're applying to our schools.
And when you say an entrance criteria, I mean a real screening process that really vets students out and gets them and their parents to understand what this really is about. It's not just, I got good grades here, so I'm just going to segue into this program. In my own experience, I went to High Horizons, and I remember in the 6th grade, I don't know what the process was, 37 years ago, but my recollection is I took a test that qualified me to go in the lottery, and I got in the lottery and I won, and I got into High Horizons, and I stayed in the magnet program throughout high school. I struggled, and I definitely, when I saw myself surrounded by the academia that I was and the caliber of students that I was definitely out of my element. And I freely say I had no business being with those people. I did not rise to their level. I was able to get through it. I improvised, adapted, and overcame, and I graduated high school, but it was hard. And it's unfortunate to put a young person in that position where then they feel the pressure to try to maintain this when maybe they never should have been there in the first place, at least at that stage in their academic career. Anyway, I'm going to go to Ms. Davis if you have anything to add, but I see Mr. Testani has his hand up. Ms. Davis, anything?
Go to Ms. Davis first.
Yeah.
I agree with what everyone is saying. I think it just ensures that the students and the families are ready for the rigor and the pace that the magnet school provides. And it opens up the communication right from the beginning of what the expectations are. And, if there are students that aren't ready and aren't prepared, like Francine said, if they're willing to put the work in and apply again at another time, we've had that happen, and you know, we've seen success with that, and they really are ready when they do enroll.
Okay, Mr. Testani.
Yeah, just to, you know, to echo what the principals are saying, I think, you know, I understand maybe what the premise was a few years back to look at it, but, you know, it really doesn't do the kids a lot of good. And I think as much as we want to try to help kids and bring them up, you know, it takes a lot of resilience. And, you know, we're dealing more and more with a generation of students that want to always feel good. And that level of resiliency may not be at, you know, at a young age what it should be. Unfortunately, you know, we've heard the term a lot of helicopter parents and all these other terms. And, you know, we really want to create an environment that Francine and the others touched on, of enrichment for students that really want to excel. I mean, we're hoping that these are kids that we can open doors for later on in their academic careers, where tier 1 universities are that's the standard, that's the goal, and that's where we're sending kids. You know, we don't want kids to go through a magnet program and then when it comes time to enter into post-secondary education, you know, they're competing for, unfortunately, no disrespect, but a magnet kid, unless it's for finances, should not be relegated to going to a community college. These are kids that should be competing with our suburban neighbors. And, you know, I from what I'm hearing and from some of the feedback and some of the things that I witnessed pre-pandemic, you know, there are kids that are struggling, and teachers now have to divert a lot of attention toward those students, which they should, and they care, and they don't want to see their kids struggle. But then the other kids are sitting there, and that their parents have an expectation that they are getting more, and in reality, it's not always the case.
Okay, I'm just going to note for the record that board member Sybil Allen is here. Do you have any questions, Ms. Allen?
No, not now. Thank you.
Okay. Ms. Carbone, you have your hand up.
And I just wanted to add, you know, I think it's a great conversation starter. I mean, I've been involved in the magnet school program for over 20 years as a teacher and now as an administrator, and it has changed tremendously. When I was a teacher there, it had to be racially balanced, you know, and there was right criteria that revolved around that. Then we focused very hard on the draw in about, you know, English and language arts, multicultural, science, STEM, whatever it was. And then it became, this is a school that's a, you know, a rigorous place to be, and you have to rise to the occasion or you're going to get sent back to your neighborhood school. And now it's like, when you talk to parents about it, why do you want your son or daughter to come to the magnet school? Well, it's a safe place to be. So, you know, it has changed over time. And I think it's really important for the district to come together and say, this is what magnet schools represent. This is what the criteria is. These are the draws of each of the school, and then, you know, build something consistent from that.
Yeah. So for this particular policy, what's committee members, what do you think is the next step? I mean, do you want these folks at the staff level to kind of come together and come up with what they think is their best recommendation related to this? Or I don't know that we want to be taking a shot at that, but what's you got your hand up, Mr. Sakala?
Yeah, absolutely. I was just going to suggest that that the principals come together, and because they run their buildings and they know what's best for the students and overall. Yeah, I think they should come back and present something to the committee, and we may have some advice and some input here and there, but we shouldn't have major educational suggestions. But I like to caution some of the pitfalls we faced before, which was some of allegations of exclusion. This is not really exclusion. This is including kids where it best fits their needs. And the magnet schools, they won't have as many needs for say interventionalists and such, and then interventionalists could be redirected to a school that would have more needs for them, and more kids will be concentrated in that area to be reached, and it'll be best overall for all the kids, all the schools, not just the magnet schools, but for all our schools, general education and magnet.
Okay. So this committee meets on an as-needed basis on the first Monday of the month. And, I know you guys are busy with other things. I don't see this as a do or die thing. So I want you to kind of give me your best sense of how long it would take you guys to go through this policy and come up with something meaningful for review. A month, 2 months, 3 months? What are your thoughts?
I would probably say if you gave us until May, gives us 2 full months to get together, considering all the other things that are happening and, possible, reopening of school and making plans for that. I think that 2 months is fair, and that we could at least have a draft that we could share. And of course, with Dr. Black, he could be, a facilitator for that. Yeah. And, I also like, I know that Mr. Sokolovic talked about, the allegations of exclusions. I'd really also like to know from this committee, what exactly is it that they want to be instilled in this policy so we could follow along with that. I mean, we know what we need, but what we need may not be what you want or think is best. So I'd like to make sure the work is aligned.
Mr. Chair, I'd just like to say, Mr. Chair, I'd just like to add, sir.
Yeah,
I think that we could be a little bit more aggressive in the timeline. If, whatever support I will give the principals to free up some time for them to meet. I think to have something for next month. While this is a topic that there's some support for, because I think it's really important that parents understand going into next school year what the expectations are.
Okay.
Dr. Black, would you agree it's a little bit more pressing than?
For the need to inform parents if it's going to be implemented with expediency, we'll definitely need to get it finalized for that purpose.
But Mike, would this impact the students and families that have applied where the lottery closes this March 12th?
No, we won't impact them, but going forward, but I think it's going to take plenty of time to get the word out and make people aware so that their understanding is very clear on going forward what the expectation will be and what they will, whatever we finalize.
Pretty much recruitment season kicks off in July for all schools, pretty much. So we just need to make sure all parents are aware, because they're kind of in the mindset of this is what I intend to do next year. So the marketing piece will be big.
Are you all comfortable with that? Carone? Davis? You'd be okay with that?
So the next meeting would be on which day? The first Monday is April 5th?
It would be the first Monday in April, which is going to be April 5th.
It's
the first week of April a vacation?
No.
Okay. It would be April 5th, which is 5 weeks from today, actually.
Well, at the request of the superintendent, we'll have something in draft form by then.
Okay. Good enough. Mr. Sokolovic, you have your hand up?
Yeah, Ms. Carbone had asked a question about the committee's desires. Personally, I'd like to see more academic rigor built into the policy. Standards, actually. Because that's a lot of what was lost, is a lot of academic rigor. Because the retention policy as well was watered down as well, quite a bit.
Do you mean a more clearly defined academic rigor, or is there a certain minimum rigor that you want to?
I think we should raise the standards a little, because there were standards before. I can't recall exactly what they were, but they were watered down a bit from like a C to a D, like 2 C's to a D or something like that. I don't know. You can see it in the old policy, but I don't know if the principles was C. I mean, because by the time like 2Ds or whatever happens, it's like a lot far gone. I mean, we could still keep some of the policy with like letter home and such. That's a good idea. But as far as the old academic graders, I don't know. I'm not expressing myself.
I think
properly.
there's two components. It's like acceptance into the program and then continuous enrollment. What do you have to do to get into the program, and then how do you stay?
Correct.
Right. Okay.
And I think they should be both tightened up to be aligned with one another, and also keeping in mind Central High School, which you guys will be feeding into, and their standards, and working in coordination with Central, so it's not like a culture shock with Central having a harder or looser program than elementary schools. Make sense?
Right. And you mentioned standards, and unfortunately, we don't have standards-based report cards right now, so it's going to be a little bit difficult to align to that. But we can certainly take that into consideration for the entrance and continuous enrollment.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Mr. Lombard?
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to, as far as this is concerned, with entrance, to comment on Ms. Carbone, what you mentioned about, going from A's and B's and 1s and 2s and going into the magnet school, and all of a sudden it's much lower grades. You talked about other measures that would be relevant, that would maybe paint a fuller picture. So I would be interested in seeing what those other measures are coming into the standards in addition to grades. And I wonder if some of those measures already exist in the school's grading in some way. That could just be something that's been going on, as opposed to something new as far as an entrance experience, something that's ongoing in their classroom. So I think that would be something good to be seen as well.
Okay, Dr. Black?
Yes, both Ms. Carbone and Mr. Lombard hit the nail on the head there in regard to performance measure. Kids who have great memory and can memorize content, they may be able to earn certain grades, but you put a performance task in front of them to execute and they struggle. I know even at the high school level, kids came in to, for example, Wheeler schools on honors list, and parents were shocked when their grades dropped because it was a performance-based achievement versus a memorization for a test. So I think it's important to have a blend of the grades, but also something that indicates a critical thinker, a performance-based form of assessment.
Okay. I've just found that the second week of April is actually April break. So the board meeting that would normally would have been held, that second Monday of the month was pushed to the first Monday of the month at 6:30. So we may need to, fiddle around with when this meeting happens. Maybe we'll do this at 5:30 instead of 6:30, or maybe we'll just do it the next day on Tuesday. But it'll be a moving target. But it'll be somewhere in that first week. I'll let the record reflect that Albert Benahan, board member, is here in the meeting. Are there any other questions about this? Okay. All right, Magnet folks, I think you have your charge for this policy at least. Did you want to discuss the sibling policy?
I just thought it'd be worth mentioning that this may need to take a closer look at as well. I mean, I think it's a nice thing. It seems to be very convenient for parents if their children are under the same roof of the schoolhouse. However, we have to look at individual children, and if we're going to look at a criteria for entrance, then both children or three children or whatever they are need to meet the criteria. It would be unfair that Victor Black gets into Park City Magnet because Victor's brother's there, and Joe Lombard can't get in because he's the firstborn in his family and he has no direct connection there, so he has to prove himself through the criteria we set up. So I think having an automatic entrance for siblings to me is just unfair to the process. And it's just more about convenience than it is anything else.
Yeah, I would agree. The sibling policy right now is basically an automatic entrance for those students that are in kindergarten, grade 1, grade 2, and grade 3. Then when they get into the upper elementary and middle school, it's kind of like a twofold situation. They get pushed to the top of the lottery because they are a sibling, so their opportunity to be looked at and accepted comes sooner than later, but they still have that very loose loose criteria to meet in order to get in. So like, for example, if Victor Black was in Park City Magnet School and he was in 5th grade and his grades were great and he maintained continuous enrollment, but he had a sibling that was coming in, let's just say 7th grade, that sibling might be number 1 or 2 on the list, but if they had D's or U's, they would not gain entrance into the magnet school policy. But if they had D's and U's and they were in 3rd grade, yes, they would. So it's very inconsistent.
So Francine or the others, quick question then. What is the likelihood that somebody's sibling is applying later on rather than sooner when it's right into kindergarten?
I think it's happened more often recently than it has in the past because some of the siblings are in charter schools or they are in a neighborhood school where they've wanted to stay or a parochial school. So it depends on the circumstance of the family, but it's happened more often recently.
Okay. And could that be attributed to the lower standards that came about a few years ago as well?
I guess that could be one contributing factor.
Okay.
So is that something that you all think could be tightened up in relatively short order? It seems like a less involved thing than the other policy. Is that something you think you could provide a draft for at the next meeting with the other policy, or is that starting to be too big of an ask?
No, I think that would be fine. I mean, I think, like you said, it's a little bit easier to make some general revisions to the sibling policy, especially if we're going to make the enrollment policy a little bit different. It just might go hand in hand. So.
Okay.
They're both entrance criteria, so I think it's best to address both simultaneously.
Sure, understood. Okay, does anyone have anything else to add? Okay. All right, so I guess you have your charge for the coming 5 weeks. We'll see you on sometime in the first week of April. We'll figure it out, and we'll take it from there. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Do you have any other questions?
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. I'm sorry, Joe. You have a question?
Just thanking the staff.
Okay. Mr. Lombard?
I was saying the same. Thank you very much.
Okay. Yes, thank you all for taking the time to be here and agreeing to take this onto your plate in addition to what you're already doing.
Right.
I guess you're relieved for the evening, unless you want to learn about remote meeting participation.
I'm going to have a full plate now.
Okay. All right.
Thank you. Thank you for your
Have a
support.
good night, everyone.
Have a great night.
Thank
No
you.
worries.
Thank
Thank
you.
you all for
Have a
being
good
here. We'll see you next time.
Good night.
Thank you.
Night.
So the next item on the agenda is the draft policy related to remote participation of board members at in-person meetings. Based on what was talked about last month, I put together a draft. It's in your package. It's really short. If you've looked at it, either of you? Pretty straightforward. I think I got everything.
Yeah, look. Yeah.
You have
I
any
just have
thoughts?
one question. I just gotta bring it up. There's a question about the chair not being able to participate. But
Hang on.
say for it, I'm gonna
me
use
pull
you
it
for
up.
example because you're the current. Yeah, thank you. That'd be best.
Okay. So what's your question?
Yeah, just for instance, I think it should be clearer that, well, like you say, the chair can't participate remote. But,
Yes.
for instance, if you have an emergency yourself, you should still be able to participate, but not as chair. The chair duty should fall on vice chair in person or whatever. Does that make sense?
Okay. How does that work? How does that work for like a committee?
Well, the committee,
Like,
was-
would
I
you
was actually
expect
thinking
him to
about giving-
designate someone to take the chair?
I think that would be best, because I think we should have that now, because, for instance, if like, say, you got hung up in traffic today, and you're chair of this committee, and we got the principals all sitting here and all the staff sitting here for like 20 minutes because you can't make it, one of the other committee members could begin the meeting.
Okay.
Perhaps some language like senior most member, or something that'll be clear who could be at the meeting,
Okay.
or voted on by the members present, or whatever.
Okay. Okay, we
Don't
can
put
add that.
that burden on me. I'm the most senior member.
Okay, okay. Are those the only real comments? Is basically some backup language in the event the chair isn't able to make it?
Yeah, that's all.
Mr. Benahan, you have your hand up?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I agree with what Joe said, because I can give you my sample that sometime I'll be in the hospital and be the chair of the student family. Say it was a bit good. Let's see if I can make it or something happens. So Joe or Miss Brown, they can take, my position until, we figure out, finish the meeting and stuff like that. So, anything, like I told you right now, guys, that you already know, anytime God, they can call my mother, and let's see, I'm the chair of the student family. I have to fly to Puerto Rico and I have a meeting. So I just want to know who's going to take care, my position until, I come back. Let's see, I've got Joe and Bobby and the committee, so they can, they can follow, my meeting. So, that's my only message, comment. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Mr. Lombard, anything?
No, it seems good. Good job.
Ms. Allen, do you have anything to add?
No, nothing at this time.
All right, so what I'll do is I'll revise this. I'll send it back out to everyone. We give it a final once over next month, and then we'll refer it to the full board. Sound like a plan?
Sounds good to me.
Okay. So that's what I'll do. The next item on the agenda is discussion and review of district retention policy. I don't recall this being referred. Is this a Testani initiative?
It was something that was supposed to go to the committee at the next meeting, not this one. That could be an error. So if you
Retention?
like- Yes,
What do you mean when you say that?
student retention. One of the things that we need to discuss at some point, I think it's more because of the pandemic than anything else, on how students are retained, or if they're retained. It's going to be a very tricky situation. We have, especially in some of our upper grade, middle school grades, that's more of where we're seeing, no matter how much outreach is engaged from our staff, that we have students not participating in the online learning, and they've chosen remote. And, I don't think, and I don't feel we're doing anyone any good by promoting children and setting them up, especially 8th graders going to 9th grade. Because if they don't have a good high school experience from the 9th grade, Dr. Black can also speak to this, the likelihood of them completing their high school diploma is significantly lower than if they have a positive experience in grade 9. So we want to put some safety nets in place. We don't just want to have a number of kids repeat 8th grade, but we have been discussing some programming and some criteria for students and some things they would have to accomplish, including summer programs and other things, or the possibility of an interim 8-9 for the first semester at the high school, where similarly to students that attended non-credit courses in post-secondary, that may be something that we would implement at the high school level. Some non-credit courses of the academics, they could earn some elective courses regardless, just so that they're better prepared prior to entering into high school level classes. So those are a number of things we've been talking about. So that's something we could kind of table the remaining discussion of this or action.
Yeah.
But we could at least start having the conversation tonight.
Okay. What do you guys have to say about this, Mr. Skalovic?
Oh, yeah, we can hold it off until we're ready for more.
Yeah, no, yeah, but I mean, do you have any initial thoughts?
Not particularly, because I just want to see a situation where a Bridgeport Public Schools diploma is seen as just kids getting passed along when they're not ready, and that can't help anybody. It can't help any of our students. I mean, one of the most heartbreaking things I heard was one of the group things I heard. One of the events I went to, we had breakout rooms. I was in a room with a couple of Bridgeport students. One of the students had told me that when they got to college, they saw the difference between night and day between the students from the neighboring towns and themselves and how they were prepared for school. So just making sure that the students are achieving the milestones and things they need to get to the next grades will be only beneficial for them.
Yeah.
Agreed. And I think to Mr. Kolovic's point, and I'd like to hear Dr. Black also chime in, is that, you know, there's sometimes a tendency from staff to be a little bit more coddling, because, you know, there are some extreme circumstances that some of our children really have to overcome day after day. But there has to be a very fine line that you draw when you're doing too much to the detriment of the student, rather than to ensure that they're going to be successful in later on when they move on from our school system. So it's a very difficult situation. You know, you really want to help and support children, and many of our staff members really do a great job with that, but not to the point where the grades do not reflect the actual work that is being produced. You know, sometimes effort gets a kid, you know, they come to school every day, they smile, they're behaved, and they put forth an effort. The grade does not reflect necessarily the quality or the rigor of the assignment or the work produced. Dr. Black?
Yes, I think Ms. Carbone alluded to that in her statements as well, when she said, you know, you might have a kid, and depending on which school they come from with their grades, an A in one school doesn't necessarily translate to an A in another neighborhood school per se. So, you know, the other thing too is instructional practices. I mean, we have great things going on in different areas and different schools. Again, I'm one from an applied learning standpoint. Our kids are really smart. I mean, they're street savvy. They know how to survive out there in the world. And when you put a book in front of them to memorize, that's not necessarily the best way for them to learn. But you give them some tasks and some applied learning, they can really excel. So, I mean, instructionally, I'm working with the superintendent as to how we can build that out a bit more. But holistically, we do need to look at instruction and how we deliver instruction to kids.
You know, one of the examples that I've been provided with recently is a student, an ESL student at one of our high schools, who has been in the country a few years, who still is a 1 on the Lost Links, which means that is basically an entry level in terms of language acquisition. Yet in their mainstream courses like English, they're getting A's. So that's problematic. It means, you know, the work that's being produced is going through a translator. It's going through other filters before it gets to the teacher. And the teacher obviously has a certain care level. They don't want to push the child too far, but in the end, we're gonna graduate this child, and we didn't do anything to support them in their journey once they've come here. I mean, for a student to be in the country several years and still score at a beginning level on the state exam, which is a good exam, means we didn't do our jobs and we didn't do our job properly. And that's just not something that's okay.
Okay. Do you have anything to add, Mr. Lombard?
Yeah, I was just actually a little more clarification of these, I don't know what you called them, those courses that they might be taking in the beginning of the school year, not for credit. What would that look like?
Well, they would be more of like a remedial type course, something that, especially given the pandemic year, that would get them to build skill levels, in English and math, for kids that are not ready for an Algebra 1 class.
So how would that fit into their schedule? It's
So
part of the regular day.
we would run another schedule, same schedule as we would, and we would cohort those kids together, and it would be for their academic classes only. So they would then go off and be in gym class or art or whatever their electives are with the rest of the students.
So it wouldn't add time to their years. It would be worked in. And would they be earning elective credit?
Well, we could talk about elective credit. We're not looking to add time, but we want to add skill level. I mean, that's what we're looking to add. So this, if we gave elective credit, it would just diminish later on some of the electives they would be taking to fill their schedules, but it wouldn't take away from the graduation requirements in the academic areas. And we do some simulants of that now already.
Right. So this would be instead of actual summer school, this would be built into the actual year.
Correct. Since we can't force them to go to summer school, we're going to offer some form of summer school, but if they don't take advantage of that, we don't want to penalize them. And I think by cohorting them together, we can provide wraparound services as well to make sure that they're getting the support from the school counselor, the social worker, their families engaged in the process, getting regular communication on progress. I think that's all part of this, and it needs to be part of this. If not, just putting them as a cohort and letting them fly is we're not really doing them justice in what we're setting out to do for them.
So would they be taking their academic courses at the same time, or this would be before they start that? How was that?
No, they would take like an English lab, we would call it, or a math lab, and that would be rather than right into their humanities requirements for graduation.
Okay.
Dr. Black could help explain it as well a little bit more.
Yeah, so just chiming in a little bit from a graduation requirement, I think I'm feeling Mr. Lombard's consternation a little bit. So normally our comprehensive high schools offered 7 courses a year over 4 years, and that would be 28 credits total. And current freshmen are facing a 25 credit graduation requirement. So part of the advantage of all high schools now being under the semester basis is they have an opportunity for 32 credits because they're doing 8 courses a year for each semester. So with the opportunity for 32 credits earned with only 25 being graduation requirement, there's a buffer there to work with wherever we need. So if it's a need for remediation, we can do that. Kids can earn credit for it, elective or otherwise, that could be determined, but it's not going to remove their ability to graduate in 4 years, if that's your concern, because we do have an opportunity for 32 credits now under the semester basis, where 25 is required for graduation. We'll still be able to meet that requirement.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
Okay.
The movement to the 4x4 block gives us some flexibility now to be able to do something like this, whereas in years past, we wouldn't have that luxury. We would end up then having to piece together half credits and things like that, which would just create more confusion for the child. But the fact that we can provide this in this current block schedule, I think we should take advantage of the time and really provide them the support they need in that transition from 8th to 9th grade. Because we had talked about prior to COVID doing more for that transition from 8th to 9th, because we don't do very much here. Historically, we never have. And we started to do some more planning around that with the high school principals and unfortunately we got smacked with COVID, but we'd like to do a little bit more of a transition type program that kids, by the time they walk in their freshman year, they have already some assimilation to the environment of the high school, rather than just a visit where they walk around for an hour, get back on the bus and go back to their middle school. To me, that's not a transition. And Dr. Black's in agreement that we need to do more to prepare them for that leap, because it is a big difference from some schools where they still get walked to the bathroom in 8th grade to that, you know, the independence of high school can be overwhelming for some kids.
Can I chime in a little bit here? There's a big difference between passive learners and active learners. We do a lot of passive compliance, memorization, that kind of thing. Active learners, where kids are engaged in discourse, conversation, communication, they're collaborating to solve problems, that kind of stuff. So when we move towards making our kids more independent learners, I think that minimizes the transitions from even for elementary to high school or whatever problems they run into. So that's our, I think, part of our next big step.
Okay. So that's where you're going with all of this. And I guess you're looking to do this in more depth at a later date.
Yeah, I think, you know, we want to just kind of look at what kind of numbers we're looking at, and really then decide on what course of action we'd like to take. I mean, it's probably not something you need to act on right now, but at some point, I think just looking at the overall future of where we're going with our students and how we want to provide them with an education that when they graduate, they'll have the ability to go on to higher ed, post-secondary training programs, the workforce. Because I think, to what Mr. Sokolovic mentioned, to give out a diploma, just a piece of paper, is irresponsible. That's not our goal. That's not our mission here.
Okay. All right. Any other comments on this? Okay. Just as an aside, I've just gotten a notification that Dr. Cardona is now the U.S. Secretary of Education. He was confirmed. So, local boy does good. Thumbs up.
Thumbs up.
So, all right, on that note, unless there's anything else, I'll seek a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Okay, is there those moved by Mr. Sokolovic? Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, time is noted as being 7:33 p.m. We'll meet again in the first week of April. Our typical date conflicts with the regular board meeting, so we'll make it work. It'll be sometime in the first week of April. Okay, have a good night.
Good night, everybody.
You too.
Bye.
Good night, everyone. God bless you all.